Now, would passing the assisted dying law be a mistake? We're going to take your calls on this now. The proposed law would make it legal for over 18s who are terminally ill to be given medical assistance to end their own life in England and Wales. The Labour MP proposing it says the safeguards put in place would be the most robust in the world. 4 former Prime Ministers, Brown, May, Johnson and the other one, Truss, Truss, have come out to say it would be a bad idea. But Lord Cameron last night changed his original opinion, now believes it should be allowed. So I thought we should just take a look at the map here and look at where it is allowed. We are not the first. We will not be the first if we do it. So 300 million people have access to some form of assisted dying. I have some post-it notes here and I will write country names on. And I'm going to start actually with an American state, and it's quoted a lot. And the state is Oregon. So up in the top left of the USA, Oregon has assisted dying, as do not quite a dozen, 10 US states have it, allowing mentally competent patients who are terminally ill to ask for life-ending medication. OK, next we go, Australia. So there we go, let's just go Oz. So most states have it in Australia now as well, so it's down under. Conditions that cause intolerable suffering are covered. Then I'm going to write NZ for New Zealand, and it's there. They also have it. They brought it in 2021 after a public referendum. We go back to Europe for our next one, and it is Spain. That's interesting, isn't it? You may not know that. It introduced it in 2021 for those with debilitating diseases. So Spain has gone for it. And if you go, let's see, Switzerland, 1942, irrespective of your condition, you would get it. And I'm just struggling because Switzerland is so tiny. I'm going up there with it. And you can also have foreigners do it. And that's why we have Dignitas, of course, as well. There are some other places as well. But that's, there are a few. And also I could populate the US a bit more. But we would still be in a minority, Darryl, if we went for it, wouldn't we?
Canada as well is right.
Holland.
I'm so sorry.
Holland. Yeah. Holland's a big one.
Yeah, you're right. We're missing them out. Let's just do them properly here.
Canada was deeply controversial.
Canada is a big one. Okay.
Deeply controversial recently because they've really relaxed, or I think things are rolling back slightly, but they had relaxed their laws and actually mental health.
Remember that was the case where somebody asked for a stair lift and was offered a lethal injection.
Was it there? I didn't.
Was it Canada?
In Canada, someone asked for a stair lift and they were offered a lethal injection.
Okay. Yeah, that is a fact.
I couldn't hear what you said. Right, OK. And also, Holland is controversial because recently someone ended their life in their 20s because they had a very profound depression. You're still in favour?
You can consent as early as, by the way, you can consent as early as 14 in Holland. Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm not in favour of that. I'm in favour of, I am on balance, and I've been grappling with this too. This is not something that, this isn't something that's sort of come easy to me, or I think anybody really, who's reached any kind of conclusion on it. I've been really grappling with it, but I think that I've come to the conclusion that this bill fits the moment, that it's time, that this bill has really good, strong safeguards. There's always the concern that that'll change down the line, but there's always the concern that it'll be introduced down the line anyway. You can't necessarily say that just because a bill has been introduced that it will. That opens the floodgates.
And it's essentially 6 months to live.
6 months to live.
So you can't do it if you're mentally unwell. You can't.
Yeah.
You think it's all right?
We shouldn't assume that this is a free-for-all. We shouldn't assume that this is open season or that we're going to end up like Canada, because we're not. There are very, very strict safeguards. There's a couple of reasons why I've reached that conclusion, and I think the first is about choice, right? It's about handing people choice. I'm pro-choice when it comes to something like abortion, for example. I believe in the right to access to an abortion. There are, as there should be, safeguards attached to that in the same way that there are safeguards attached to this. But I think at the other end of our lives, we should also have the choice. We have people who are living in profound misery, for whom life is not worth living, people who have reached the end of their life.
We're going to have to let Anne in here.
I want the choice to do it. It's about choice.
What about all that?
Right. First of all, I agree, it's a difficult one. And in principle, I'm sure we'd all like to say that if people, are in intolerable pain and they're going to die anyway, why should you not speed it up if that is what they want? However, Parliament has a duty to look at the population as a whole. And I want to take your point about the abortion law. Now, abortion was introduced in 1967. And the law itself didn't change until 1990. But in that time, the practice changed beyond all recognition. So that having been told, and it's there in Hansard, Parliament having been told that this would not lead to abortion on demand, you had to have 2 doctors. Well, initially, of course, the 2 doctors actually, took it seriously. But you ended up with doctors even pre-signing forms. It became a formality. Now, we've got 2 doctors in this bill, and I see no reason why it shouldn't go in exactly the same direction. It is a question not of whether you're going to change the law, because actually that's the safeguard. I mean, if the law has to change, then you have to debate it all over again.
Yeah.
But let me finish.
No,
he did have quite a long session.
Lots of callers, though.
Yeah, I know, but he did have quite a long session.
No, but I've got to do the timings.
Yeah, I know you have.
I filibustered you out of the,
no,
out of the debate.
It's not a filibuster at all. I think it's crucially important that we understand that just because the safeguard is written into legislation, solid experience in this country, not in somebody else's country, in this country shows us it doesn't hold.
You get mission creep.
We haven't
hang on. I want to take a caller. Tanya in Hertfordshire, hi.
Hi.
Well done. Okay, now let me think. I reckon I can sometimes work it out from the first moment you speak. I wonder if you're in favour of this law.
I am indeed. We are all going to die, but it's how we die that I think is really important. I lost my husband to a horrific cancer death 16 years ago. Nothing in life is perfect. We always have to look at what is best overall. If you are told that you have terminal cancer, just knowing that you have the agency over how you pass already would make you, I think, feel a little more comfortable. And people who do take their own life because it is so awful for them, they sometimes botch this. And also, of course, their family are so upset that they had to do it in this way because they couldn't have their family with them.
Did your husband ask you to help him towards the end of his days?
No, I have to say, in his case, it was really horrific because he was on death's door and then he had a stroke. And in the hospice, they said, look, the only way we can let him go as soon as possible is if we withdraw hydration as well as nutrition. And I sat with him for 5.5 days while he was starved and dehydrated to death. Now, if you think that's humane,
it's not.
No,
well, you wouldn't do that to a pet dog.
Something similar happened to my dear dad as well, and I think that is brutal. It's also where you become incapable of taking in water without aspirating, breathing it in. And so you just can't have any water, and it's just horrible. Well, you would fully sympathise with that, Darryl.
Yeah, I would, and like all families, I think I've had sort of similar experiences, and I think I sort of return to my point that it's about choice, and I think that I would just push back just gently on the abortion issue that I don't think that anybody is seriously arguing that our abortion laws are too lax, that it isn't as difficult as it needs to be. Well, it is the point because you've pointed to. No, it is the point because you've pointed to
that you don't need a change in the law for things to change, and that would apply to this as well.
But what's your worry? That people will
the safeguards will just be relaxed.
But what's your worry about that? I mean, in the end, you're not worried about someone being murdered.
Well, a few maybe, but not many.
No.
I'm not worried about that. I mean, I might point out that there are 8 cases at the moment that call themselves assisted dying that are being investigated for things like homicide, but that's not the general. That's not the general concern.
Well, that's because we don't have legal assisted dying.
Let me give you a very good example of what I think can go wrong.
Okay.
And it's in Oregon, which is supposed to be, the mecca of assisted dying. Their own health authority, no pressure group, their own health authority has said that 47% of the patients who've received assisted dying have talked about being a burden, against only 28% that have talked about being an intolerable pain. And I'm very concerned, and most people are, and should be, and you can't just sort of brush it to one side, about this whole business of people not wanting to be a burden and feeling that they have a duty.
They have the same rule that we would have, about 6 months left to live, but obviously that may not be working. And also, I don't think doctors do this people say you've only got 6 months.
It's not infallible.
Well, it's certainly not. Christine in Sheffield, hi.
Hello there.
Are you in favour of this law passing?
Up to a point, I think it's a good idea. But I think it will be abused, as it is being doing now.
As Anne says.
Yes, but it's already being abused now. because the doctors now are playing God at the moment, and they're putting do not resuscitate notices on patients without any discussion whatsoever.
Well, that's not right. You have to consent to a DNR, or at least your next of kin.
No.
Your next of kin.
You don't think so, Christine?
Your next of kin obviously has to consent to a DNR.
I
So if that's
can
happening,
assure
then
you.
that's obviously
Let's listen to Christine.
unfair.
Yeah.
It's not, I can assure you. It's 2 years tomorrow since I lost my husband, and I was told that he'd agreed to a do not resuscitate. That is no way he would have agreed. I'd been with him 58 years, and he would never have agreed without saying anything. He went into hospital. He was sitting for 1 week at the side of his bed with no clothes on. No clothes.
What?
I asked why he hadn't got his pyjamas on, and they said, oh, the catheter in his arm keeps coming out because of the sleeve. I said, well, I'll cut the sleeve out.
Right, that's dreadful.
And then they stopped his medication.
Oh.
They weren't listening to me when I said he couldn't hear properly what they were saying. And on the last night, I was told, only by chance, because I'd actually seen something on a piece of paper, he agreed to a do not resuscitate. So I was going to go and talk to him. Didn't get the chance because they were messing about.
Is it your thought that it would be better if you and he could take a decision about ending his life together?
He wouldn't have done that.
He wouldn't have done it. So in a way, you'd be against it, I think.
I would have been for that, but I can appreciate it in different ways.
I understand, Christine.
We had a friend who was had a motorbike accident, and he was in hospital for 8 years, couldn't move from the neck down, and he kept begging people when he could actually speak because he had a trachea, saying, I don't want to live like this. And yes, I can understand that. But there was nothing wrong with my husband in that respect.
Christine, thank you so much. Funnily enough, the motorbike accident wouldn't be covered by this law. And if you're in a situation where you can only communicate by blinking and you're in a bed for the next 40 years, you probably should be covered, actually.
Yes, but you
should be able to.
And,
but you should be.
No, this is the point, Jeremy. I think you've identified the problem. We're all going to come up with categories of people that we feel very strongly should be covered, but who aren't going to be covered. Mm-hmm. Now, let me give you the example I've given before on this programme, but I do feel it very strongly. There's a requirement for mental competence. And I'm sure we'd all say, yes, of course there is. 2 patients side by side, both terminally ill, both in the same degree of pain. This one's mentally competent, that one isn't. How long do you think you'll preserve that distinction? And if you don't, you've moved from voluntary to involuntary euthanasia.
OK, Karen is in Cheshire. Hi, Karen.
Hello, Jeremy and panel.
Do you think this could be a really big moment if they pass it on Friday, couldn't it?
Yes, it could be. And I hope they do pass it.
You hope they do? Right, tell us why.
Yes. Well, your 2 previous callers have said what I was going to say, that the DNR, they do not resuscitate. And also, I'm not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of how I die. And if the doctor says I have 6 months left to live, providing I have a certain quality of life and the pain is manageable, yes, but not if I'm suffering terribly. No, there's no quality left then.
Yeah. Well, they used to give you morphine and then they would up the dose gradually and then you would have a fatal dose. And now, the doctors are very uncomfortable now with that because they think they'll get prosecuted. They're probably right as well.
And it's tightened up hugely since Shipman as well.
Oh, since Shipman, of course.
Yeah.
So, but you don't worry that a relative, let's say, Karen, you lived in a mansion and a relative thinks, if Karen goes, I'll get the mansion. And they start just putting, as Anne says, they put a little bit of pressure on you. Say, I'm a bit too busy to visit you next week, Karen.
Oh, no. No, I can't see that happening at all, Jeremy.
Can I just make a point on that? Because I think it's right at the crux of this. Is that I understand there's the possibility for creep. Okay, let's just park that for a moment. But we're not talking here about people who are living a full life, who have mansions and who have children and grandchildren who want access to assets. We're talking about people who are coming toward the end of their life, for whom we are giving choice and dignity. And there is possibility for coercion, of course there is, and we have to find a way to safeguard against that.
Self-coercion.
No. Well,
duty.
But people,
duty. duty.
Well, people feel a duty to live. I mean, there are people who are unwell who will feel a duty to live because of a commitment to their loved ones, or we talk in terms of battles and fights. When you die of a disease, you are often referred to as losing your battle. That's a terrible thing that we culturally. That's a terrible place that culturally we have got into.
I agree.
So we could make the exact same argument on the other side. But I think I think it's really important that in this bill, in this version of assisted dying, this idea that it is people who are well and healthy who are going to be coerced into ending.
Okay, hang on, let's just get one more call. Just a second, hang on.
Nobody's saying they're well and
Alan
healthy.
in Essex is on the line. Alan, we got a minute. Go ahead.
Hello, Jeremy. I think I agree absolutely with Ann Widdecombe.
Right.
She's an utterly sensible lady, great deal of experience, has seen life and death, of course. But to assist people to self-administer their suicidal death is an awful thing to do.
Why?
And
Why?
Well, because it is suicide. I'm 93 years old, which doesn't reflect in my voice.
You've got an amazing voice.
He has. For 90.
That is brilliant.
That's fine. Let's not talk about that too much. I was in the hospital. I did 3.5 years work in a hospice as a bedside nurse.
Oh.
I have 2 sons who are GPs. No, one son's a GP, one's a consultant, and I have a grandson who's a GP. You mentioned a very important thing there, Jeremy, about increasing the dose of morphine until it becomes a fatal dose. That is only noticeable if you notice it, because if somebody is suffering such intolerable pain, they need an increasing dose. That is a therapeutic dose,
I know,
not a suicidal
Well,
dose.
that was the getter.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, Alan, listen, thank you. It was so nice to hear your voice, and please call again. Later is the papers and everything else. Find out all kinds of stuff, actually, in the papers today. We're going to meet Maria McCurlane as well, and she's got a book out, and she's brilliant, and she's an agony aunt. We're going to try her on some problems. After the break, we're asking...